Grown-up conversations with people who know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. Well, today I'm delighted to be joined by the Managing Director of Woking-based V4 Wood Flooring. And that's Joe Sims. And here in the studio, it's Max King, Investment Trust Director and columnist at Money Week. Let's go to you first, Joe. It's great to have you on the show. We love to feature small business leaders, people making their way, employing people, trying to do better for themselves and their family. I wanted to talk to you about the cost of your inputs. You're obviously using a lot of wood. It's what you do. What's happening to wood prices? What's happening to the price of the stuff that you need to deliver the goods, the services, the product that your consumers want?
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, yes, it's going up in every aspect, really. Everything we do is being faced with extra costs. We're an ambitious company with big growth plans. We supply an in-demand product to the UK, and in recent times we've been selling into Europe. We import from the world, so we interact with suppliers' markets on all sorts of levels. So, you know, this is a global issue, but specifically to us, it's getting the product into the country and then getting it out to our customers and their end users. So we're really noticing the increases on fuel charges, raw material costs, because every material is in demand at the moment. So we're all feeling it. But we're fortunate enough to work with a very sustainable product. So supply is manageable. We'll only ever buy from managed and responsibly sourced forestry. And it really, our biggest issues are getting the product in and then distributing it to our network of retailers and their end users, I would say.
It strikes me, Joe, that wood flooring, it really is, you know, it's a perfect storm for you guys. You're using wood, which is going up in price. Wood is actually quite heavy. It's quite expensive to import, export, to move around the country. The wood you're using is processed. That means energy for machines. It means skilled workers. And then you need skilled workers again to lay the wood floors in the homes and the businesses that you service. So from all directions, your cost base is going up, and that must be pushing up the price that you eventually charge the end users.
Definitely. I mean, we're seeing temporary energy surcharges from manufacturing. You know, it goes hand in hand. They need energy to produce. So you can understand these costs. But you're right, you know, we're looking at having to pass some of the cost on, but we've done everything we can not to do that. You know, we've tried to hold our prices. We've only really looked at, from V4, we've done 4 price increases in 2 years, where we've been facing price increases from supply chains monthly. So we've done everything we can to swallow a lot of the cost so that we can pass on some confidence to our resellers so that they can go out. You know, we've been dealing with contract work as well, and a lot of that is very long lead times. You agree a price, then 6 to 12 months later they require material to be delivered, and we're having to kind of honour price or take hits on profit margins.
That's really interesting. Max King, turns to you. You've often written about inflation in recent weeks and months in your excellent Money Week column. The reason I rather laboured the point at the top of the show with those CPI numbers, RPI numbers, and then the PPI, Producer Price Index numbers, is that I wanted to show that producer prices are much higher than consumer prices in the round. Now, there are some big businesses with market power, you could say, are profiteering from an inflation environment. I know that's a theme in some people following stocks and shares in the City of London. But I put it to you that for a lot of smaller companies that don't have big purchasing power, who can't hedge their energy supplies you know, in a sophisticated way, that they're actually absorbing a lot of this price pressure, and margins among small and medium-sized enterprises could be being squeezed.
That's certainly true, but you have to remember that in dollar terms, most commodity prices are now falling. And the problem in the UK is that the Bank of England has been asleep at the wheel and not raise interest rates as aggressively as they are doing in the US. As a result, sterling is weaker, and that's pushed up inflation pressure. And that means that in Britain, the inflation cycle is probably 3 months behind the US. The US inflation cycle is peaking and will shortly come down. The UK has got further to rise. What I find most depressing is the utter delusion of, for example, that Minister for London who thinks that the government Prime Minister can wave a magic wand and bring down inflation. You can't do that. Inflation is a result of mistakes made a year or two ago, and keeping inflation down in the longer term will depend on long-term policies. There's actually nothing you can do about current inflation. Once upon a time, I think Dennis Healey, as Chancellor, had this brilliant idea.
The Labour Chancellor with the big eyebrows.
Yeah, and he thought he reduced VAT from 10% to 8%, which Britain couldn't afford and had no effect whatsoever. So all these sort of fiddling around with taxes just doesn't work. So, you sort of expect the opposition to realise, to clamour for these sort of things. But the idea that a Conservative minister thinks that somehow you can wave a magic wand and bring down inflation is utterly depressing.
But what you're saying there, just to unpack a little bit, is because the Bank of England has been slow to raise interest rates, that means that the pound is underperforming against the dollar. That makes our inputs more expensive of commodities. Even though commodities are generally priced in dollars, they're coming down. But because sterling is weak, we're still feeling those inflationary pressures.
Exactly, and it doesn't help anyone. The sort of Bank of England thinks it's being helpful by keeping interest rates down. It isn't. It's actually being extremely harmful and making the pain worse. And I'd have thought that they're now talking about a 0.5% interest rate rise in August. Well, they should be putting it up by a full percentage point, in my view, to get ahead of the curve. And then we can start to see some real impacts on the medium term on inflation.
Strong words. We're going to carry on this discussion after the break. But just before we do go to that break, let's bring in briefly Alexandra Lloyden. She is from St James's Place, a wealth management company. Alexandra, were you surprised by this high inflation number? Do you share Max King's view that come the autumn, as in the States, we could see inflation peaking and then coming down?
Yeah, hi, Liam. Yes, I do share that view. It's an increasingly worrying situation to be in. The research that we've conducted through St James's Place, we do a sort of financial health report annually. 1 in 5 see their total household wealth drop, or have seen their total household wealth drop in 7 months. The cost of living crisis is deepening, with energy prices expected to rise again in October. We can only see this situation worsening. I do agree we are behind the curve. I saw Andrew Bailey's presentation, his no ifs, no buts, to the financial and professional services industry earlier this week, where they were talking about the rise in interest rates, and I think we have to face into it.
Indeed, Andrew Bailey there, the Governor of the Bank of England, gave a pretty important speech at the Mansion House last night in his best bib and tucker to his mates in the City of London. We will come back to this discussion after the break. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We'll keep this conversation going. Keep your emails coming in. Do you think real inflation, your lived experience, as they say, of cost of living rises, means that prices are going up by more than that 9.4% CPI headline inflation number out this morning? Stay with us. You're On the Money. Welcome back. You're On the Money. It's 1:20 here on GB News TV, DAB plus digital radio and online. We are discussing that new inflation number came out this morning, 9.4% consumer price index inflation. The retail price index is much higher. It's 11.8% inflation. Measures of producer price indices, they're up above 20%, those cost pressures in the supply chain. I'm still with my expert panel. Let's go back to you, Joe Sims. You are Managing Director of V4 Wood Flooring. You're based in Woking. You were talking before the break about the extent to which your input prices were going up. You're having to absorb a lot of those price increases within your company. It must be impacting your profitability. Just describe to us, some people think inflation is a kind of arcane concept. You're probably too young to remember the 70s. Of course you are, unlike me and Max here in the studio. Are you surprised, as a sort of, citizen of the UK, the impact that inflation has had on not just your business, but the businesses of people you see around you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it affects people on every level. I mean, looking at the human element of it, we've got a team of guys here who are also feeling the pinch. There's costs increasing across the board. It's every part of it. It's everything we do as well. It's the small things. The food. We have a showroom here where we supply coffee, milk, but it's every single aspect of it that surprises you the most. It's almost like you cannot get away from it being affected on your daily life, your work life. And unfortunately, it's the end user, the consumer, who feels it the most with these price increases. It is a very surprising thing.
Alexandra Lloyden of St James's Place Wealth Management. What is your advice to people who may be lucky enough to have a few quid stashed away? They're thinking about how they invest it. Should they be in stocks and shares? How can they protect themselves from inflation? Because it strikes me, I was thinking about this coming to work this morning, thinking back to the 70s. Yes, headline inflation then might have been higher, 18, 20%, even more. But back then, interest rates were 10, 11 or 12%. So just by sticking your money in the bank, you got to protect it in part from inflation. You can't do that now because you're lucky if you get any interest from the bank.
Yes, that's right, Liam. I mean, we wouldn't be recommending for clients to sort of hold significant or sizable percentages of their available capital in cash because of the risk of inflation. However, appreciating that, with the rising cost of living, people are probably not going to have as much disposable income or capital as they did have. But essentially, our advice would be try and save and not spend. It can feel like a challenge when the cost of daily expenses is rising, but where you can save and you can invest and you can inflation-proof that money and that capital, we would be strongly encouraging clients to consider that any surplus capital they have to protect it from inflation.
Max King, much of what you write about for Money Week these days is macroeconomics and policy and so on. But you are, we met when you were a professional asset manager. I was working in the asset management industry. This is a scary time for people, isn't it, who are lucky enough to have some savings. What to do in this high inflation environment?
Well, there's two things you can do. One is to buy things which are going up in price because they'll be, and which you're going to need in the future because they'll be cheaper now than they will be in 6 months' time or a year's time. That's a classic sort of thing you do in Argentina. Nobody saves any cash, Well, you've got some cash. What do you do? Go and
you spent a lot of your early life, right, in Argentina.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why you know so much about inflation.
Well, and there, despite a boom because of commodity prices, inflation is 70%.
Yeah.
But the alternative is you can invest it, and you know that stock markets bottomed a month ago, and now they're going up. That's not necessarily going to be sustained, but my guess it probably is. And while the news on inflation and the economy goes on getting worse, markets will go on.
That's interesting because people who don't know, you have a pretty serious reputation in the asset management industry. So and we're not recommending particular stocks here, but for you to say that is really quite significant. You think, Max, even though interest rates are going to go up, you think stock markets now have bottomed out and are likely to sustain these gains?
It looks that way, and what seems to be doing well at the moment is not so much the value stocks, it's the growth stocks, and that's quite normal. It's usually that markets reach a low in the early stages of interest rate rises, and then they start rising in the face of bad news. That's quite normal. They start worrying when everybody else is terribly happy, and they start getting happier when everybody else is in meltdown.
Joe Sims, let's go back to the front line of Britain's small businesses. You are managing director, as I said, of V4 Wood Flooring Company, a company in Woking with a lot of ambition. You got some success behind you. You want a lot more. We're looking at this Tory leadership contest. Lots of chest beating and finger pointing amongst the candidates. Not so much policy. A bit of a row on tax. What do you want the next Prime Minister to do in terms of policy? What do you think of the fact that corporation tax is going to go up from 19 to 25% next year if former Chancellor Rishi Sunak gets his way?
Well, it's a difficult topic. I mean, we're looking for some sort of stability, really. And as I say, we're looking to grow. We're looking to move into new markets. We just need, some form of help in that, guys. We are reinvesting back into our own business. We are, looking at new websites, new products, new staff training, new vehicles. We're looking at more fuel-efficient vehicles, electric vehicles. We just want some stability from the government, really. That's where we can then move forward. It's incredibly hard to make business decisions with such uncertainty.
And Alexandra, finally to you, a lot of your clients will be people who own and run businesses who are coming to you for investment advice. What is the state, in your view, of British business sentiment at the moment? There's so much bad news around. You know, I feel terrible every day. We try and pick out some good news stories and put them forward to our viewers and listeners, but it seems as if the business community is being pummeled. Are you feeling that coming through when you talk to your clients, when they talk to you?
I think it's mixed. I think it depends how sort of prepared you are for the situation that we're currently in. Some clients are more resilient than others. We spoke about it earlier. Businesses, some businesses are in different shapes to others. I think in situations like this, as I say, we encourage clients to see it out. Don't act irrationally. Make sure that you are making informed decisions, and essentially, sort of bear in mind that if you are sitting on huge sums of cash, whether that's personally or within your business, that in high inflationary environments, the impact that has on the long-term value of your own wealth and that of the business as well.
Talk to you today. You are from St James's Place. I enjoyed also talking to Joe Sims of V4 Wood Flooring. An important discussion there on inflation. We'll obviously return to that subject soon here on The Money, and Max King is staying with me for the rest of the show. Thanks for your comments, Max, too. This is On The Money with me, Liam Halligan.